Welcome back, guys, to another video. I'm personally excited about this one because we've known each other for quite some time indirectly in the land of YouTube, but so happy to actually have a couple minutes with Michal himself, who actually has a pretty awesome background. Very fascinating. He did not start his career as a recruiter. We can kind of get into that in deep dive, but very excited to share a couple minutes and share his story with you all. And happy to also share my story with his audience and answer any questions too. But Michal, thank you so much for being here and very excited to chat with you.
Yeah, same here, same here. I mean, I've been seeing you for quite some time on YouTube. I guess we cannot miss each other there. You produced lots of videos. I recorded quite some. So yeah, there we are. But now we are finally meeting each other on Zoom, face to face, kind of.
Face to face. How cool is that? The world of social media. But I kind of want to get into it and learn more about your background. So I know if you guys are watching and you have not seen Michal's video, he has a fantastic channel, very focused on recruitment, specifically in technical recruitment, which we'll talk about more. But your background is fascinating because you actually, most of your career has been kind of in the engineering world, software engineering. You were a CTO, you started other companies. So let's talk about that real quick. Like, how did you get into that? Is that something you've always wanted to do? And what sort of stuff have you done throughout your software engineering kind of career before you got into recruiting?
Yeah. So I used to be software engineer. I used to be the individual contributor years and years ago, and then I transitioned to being a CTO. So with my fellow co-founders, we started a business in Asia, in Bangkok, where I was the CTO. And when I was the CTO, I noticed that recruiters couldn't really help me to fill some of the IT roles that I was responsible for, and I had to grow the team relatively quickly. So I was engaged with one technical recruiter, not very helpful, another recruiter, not helpful, another recruiter, and my frustration grew over time. Eventually, I was just recruiting people myself to join the team. And when I moved back to Europe, I was like, hey, this is something I personally struggled with. And I know there are lots of people who are transitioning from non-technical field to the IT world. They struggle with the IT terminology and they need to engage with technical candidates. So why don't I create a channel to explain some of these topics? And then we built an academy with courses for these people who transitioned.
Wow, super interesting. So it just happened very organically with you. You were just not happy with the recruiters you were working with, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it myself. But a lot of decision makers, authority makers, or even high level executives like CTOs, a lot of them do recruiting, right? They spend and allocate a certain amount of time in their day-to-day to recruiting, as obviously that's very important, but not a lot of them actually make that whole switch saying, I'm gonna go from a CTO to recruit myself to now dive headfirst into this recruitment field. So before the whole YouTube channel and everything, when you said you started recruiting, was there ever like a phase where you just started, like you kind of left the CTO world and you became a solo recruiter, or you started your own agency, or like you did recruiting on the side? Like, was there any sort of like middle step for you?
Yeah. So when I was the CTO, I was hiring and also recruiting, because if the pipeline is empty, you need to fill it in either with recruiters or yourself. So I started recruiting, searching for candidates on GitHub and through a network. I started organizing events where people came. And then obviously I started approaching them with some of the opportunities we had in our teams. So that was the kind of organic way for me to start recruiting, because I had to. But then when the company grew to a certain amount, revenue, we reached over $70 million per year. And I noticed that the business was less and less exciting for me personally, because suddenly it was all about optimizations. It was all about, integrating fourth payment gateway just to save 0.01% of the transaction costs, or the overall costs. And that's when I started looking at something a bit more meaningful. So I wanted to transition from the startup world where we raised lots of money, but it was not very rewarding personally, to something that would be a bit more rewarding, right? When we help people to transition their career, whether through helping them find a job or upskilling them, it's really more rewarding for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, and maybe you as well, right? You do recruiting as well, and I'm sure you get also lots of messages from people who you helped find a job, And then a year or 2 years later, they reach out and say, like, hey, this was a great endeavor. Thanks a lot. I relocated thanks to your help finding this job. And that's something that is much more fun, really, compared to the job where we were integrating the fourth payment gateway.
I think one of the biggest reasons why people come into recruiting and stay in recruiting is just the fulfillment aspects, right? I've been recruiting for a long time, and aside from obviously maybe like the money you can make or the success in your career or your title, all that aside, I think it's the wonderful phone calls or emails that you get from clients or your customers or candidates saying, I've gotten my dream job, or like I got a job from you and I love it. It changed my family's life. And it just never gets old, right? It
So
never
true.
gets old. So whether you're recruiting for like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 5, 10 years, it honestly never gets old. And it really honestly helps like the swings and the tough times in staffing, in recruitment that we all go through. And so if you're looking for more purpose or for more meaning in your life, I mean, that definitely checks off that box, right? Than just kind of tinkering away at a feature or a product that you're like, this is just not making any impact on myself or perhaps many people around the world.
Yeah. And
Which is,
do you also have a folder with screenshots of what people send to you?
I think that's a great idea. I do not. I should.
Yeah,
I
I
should.
would
Do you?
totally, yeah, I would totally suggest to kind of everyone listening to this, not just you, but I have this folder. There are so many messages, and sometimes I take screenshots of emails. Sometimes people leave comments on Trustpilot or somewhere. And then when you read it, I mean, it kind of feels good. But the real power of these recommendations and testimonials and nice emails is when you feel really bad about what's going on. In recruiting, we have lots of ups and downs. And especially when candidates are not responding, clients are not responding, clients don't pay invoices or whatever, there are so many different aspects that can go wrong. I usually just open this folder and I just randomly open some of these nice messages that people send, and it gets me back to the positive mode.
You know what? I'm all about finding new hacks and new tools to use to make my frown upside down, Michal, because recruiting is tough. It really is. And like, I do my best, and I'm sure you do, and everyone else who puts out content, we do our best to kind of capture recruitment realistically, right? But like, there's only so much a camera can capture. And it's like with any job, though, it's not just in recruiting. There's ups and there's downs, and downs can get really difficult. And I honestly, yeah, agree with you. If I had a folder on my phone with amazing testimonials, that would just get me back on my feet as soon as possible. So I think that's a great recommendation. And if anyone's listening and you're not doing that, you should totally do that. Maybe you should print them out, Michal, and put them all over your wall and frame it. So, when you're not looking at your computer, you can kind of
So true, so
enjoy
true.
all the wonderful kind of kind words that people are saying. But that's funny. And so I know that and what inspired you to kind of get into YouTube? Like how did that start from someone who was like a CTO who's super professional and serious?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really recall the decision. It was probably one of those moments when I felt like I have to start something else. I often have this itch. I'm the kind of person who likes to build things from scratch, and then when they reach certain threshold, like the example of the startup where we need to integrate the fourth payment gateway, I like to hand over to someone else. So often I'm looking for these new projects that I can kick off, and I guess this was one of them. I don't recall exactly the moment, but most likely it was connected with the academy and the courses. So I started producing content, and then most likely I was looking around and thinking, hey, why don't I also promote it on YouTube? But how was it on your end actually? Like, have you had some more structured thought process, or was the decision made strategically?
Yeah, so definitely not strategic. It was I would say it's more of like a kind of extension of like an interest I've had my whole life. So growing up, I was really into just cameras. So I love photography, I love videography in high school. And I just had to kind of put that away when you get older. You go to college, you have to get a job, and you just have to get more serious. And a lot of the creative things or things you used to do growing up, you just have to put it to the side. And so when I started recruiting, Michal, I basically started first as just a freelance or just a solo recruiter. I was by myself for a couple years. And that was great. I was able to do a good handful of full-time contingent placements every single year. Life was great. I was able to travel, flexibility, but it got very lonely,
Mm.
right? Because I was a solo recruiter, I didn't have a team, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe like instead of hiring someone, I can maybe make a friend of the camera. And I kind of wanted to go back and do something creative for a long time, just kind of have a creative outlet. And again, YouTube, about 3, 4 years ago, everyone's heard of it. It's obviously a huge major platform. And I'm like, maybe this could be just be a cool thing I can do, and just it can help me blow off some steam creatively wise, and just not take it that serious and just see where it goes. And so that's kind of what happened. Just kind of documenting my journey, documenting the ups and downs and the things I've learned. And then here we are. So obviously, 3 years afterwards, I take it a lot more serious now. I'm sure like you do. And trying to be a little bit more strategic, but a lot of it is just the same pillars I stuck to when I first started, which is trying to be authentic and be transparent and be genuine, be myself. I try really, really hard to just make that consistent. So I think like YouTube right now, it feels more like a commitment, obligation, and some sort of like a fun thing I do on the side, which I don't care about when it first kind of started. But yeah, it's really cool to see just how it organically grew, and the people that I met like you through social just has been kind of nothing short but amazing. So it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, indeed. Same here. I mean, just sometimes I read the comments and the feedback from people. It's so cool to see that people are watching some of the videos that are 4 years old and people still find them valuable. Some of the videos I recorded about technologies like databases and MySQL, and they are still valuable, and the technologies are still around. I should probably record also videos about some of these new technologies, but I shifted my focus on the YouTube channel to start talking to some other people who are recruiters to also learn from their experience. So I'm trying to find some balance between posting about those really technical topics, which is what I started with, and some more technical, some more engaging topics. But you do really a good job with some of the short videos talking about what's going on in the life of a recruiter. Those are very engaging.
I appreciate that. So speaking of in the life, I know we're shooting this in 2024, where your focus, your niche is technology, right? Technical recruitment. And for the lack of a better word, tech recruiting has been brutally difficult and it continues to be very, very challenging moving forward. And so like, what have you done? What have you seen others do? Even like the students that went through your program, like how are people adapting to this market? Are there any kind of advice or strategies that you're following that can help people push through? And this can also apply for people who are not in technical recruiting, people who are in legal or healthcare recruiting, any type of recruiting. A lot of markets are being hit right now, right? So what are you seeing, and kind of like what are you encouraging people to do in tough times?
Yep. Well, obviously 2 years ago we had the peak in technical recruiting. Probably a year ago as well, it was going really well. Lots of companies were recruiting people externally. It feels like for the last year they not just cut the budgets for external recruiters, but also cut the or restructure their teams. So we saw, for example, lots of demand for front-end developers, back-end developers, and now with some of the AI tools being able to co-create the code with developers, also companies are not hiring as many of them anymore. So they restructured, but then that also brings some new roles that are in higher demand. For example, cloud, DevOps, machine learning, data engineering, data analytics. So some of the people in our community, they shifted their focus from recruiting Java engineers to recruiting DevOps engineers or AWS cloud engineers. So that's one thing that definitely helps. And I've seen people also transition from technical recruiting to some other fields. Lots of people actually went from the external recruiting to internal corporate HR. And some of the people transitioned also to coaching, which is also what we have built over the last 2-3 years. So we have different verticals. One was recruiting. The other was the training, which we were already talking about. And the third one was the coaching business. So we are also coaching CTOs to get more and better opportunities. And as the time goes, we are spending more time in some of these business lines. So now we are actually pushing further the coaching business because there is higher demand than there was 2 years ago.
For sure. I think the coolest thing about recruiting is that you can go out there and work for yourself. And for any reason you want to go back and get a job or get a career, if you can show like a really good track record or accolades or milestones working for yourself in the external world, that's still very much high in demand on the internal world. I think some of the best internal recruiters have been whether self-employed or they were they learned the agency world, right? And then they took those good habits and discipline
Yep.
into the internal world. I'm not saying internal recruiters today without external background is somehow worse or on a different level, but I also do know that external recruiting is so different from internal, right? We get measured KPIs, and you just go through a lot, I think, of like more entrepreneurial or sales experience that will help you develop a really good work ethic if you're able to push through and find success, or be okay with rejection and failure, which maybe it's at a different scale than as if you did not have that experience, right? And so that's why I always say that if you want to do well in recruitment, specifically working for yourself or external, I think if you have a previous experience starting your own company or working in sales, business development, where it's you're starting every month from zero, you have to eat what you kill mentality, and you get faced with rejection every single day. People who are able to thrive or push through that, you just learn such more important skills, develop a really strong foundation that can set yourself up for success in anything that you do, recruiting or non-recruiting. Right.
Yeah.
And so
very well
whether
said.
you want to go into coaching, internal, external, you want to, scale your agency. I think there's so many things for anybody, depending on their interests and their strengths.
Yeah. Very well said. Really, very well said. When we say the word recruiter, it can be corporate recruiter, internal or external agency recruiter. So the word is the same, recruiter, but the ups and downs and the responsibility, it's totally another level. It's like we were comparing soldiers, some people who are playing safe in a safe field, and others who are fighting in Ukraine against Russia, right? So that's how I see those external recruiters who are pushing hard. And it's, even if you think about how difficult it is mentally to overcome the rejection, when you know that you need to make money to pay for team salaries, or if someone is a solopreneur, then of course they just need to cover their living costs, but still they may have a family. So just the pressure and the additional challenges that come with it, like that's another level. But people will come really strong out of this. So there is something positive at least out of this situation.
From your students that have gone through your program, or the recruiters that what are some things that you see that really successful recruiters do, right? Or what or they have that separates themselves from people who don't perform at a high level?
Yeah, great question. One, I would say they niche down. So they, for example, choose a very small segment of Java engineers in Munich, in Germany, for example, which is moderately large city in Europe. And they just focus on that one specific segment of IT professionals. The huge advantage is that they build the network, the talent pool, they get the contact details of these people, because it's just, let's say, 1,000 or 2,000 of them in that one city. So it's doable. And as a result, they can recycle the talent pool faster. They don't have to start from scratch each search. On the contrary, the not very successful recruiters, they work on contingent mode, the business model, and they start every search with a blank sheet of paper. And that's a nightmarish situation, because you cannot really recycle. Everyone can go to LinkedIn, of course, but still you need to connect with those prospects. You need to message them. They don't know you. The response rate is really low. And also, if you jump from one segment to another, even within IT, you have web developers, data analysts, SAP developers. It's still very different. So your knowledge is not deep enough to assess the quality of those candidates. So back to your question, what helps recruiters to stay in the game and be successful is the niche that they choose and they operate in. And the second, which I kind of mentioned, is the talent pool. So the stronger the talent pool within some niche, the easier it is. Just imagine you would have the list of 1,000 Java developers in Berlin, for example, and someone would come and say, hey, Preston, we are looking for a Java developer in Berlin. And then you just get the list, right? And like, oh, let me call these 5 guys out of 1,000, and right away you can make a placement. So that's the sweet spot. Why people are not there? I would say because it's no fun building that list. I had several challenges for some of our students to go through, and I saw how difficult it is for them to actually dedicate their time, because the payoff is so distant. It may take 6 months or a year to reap the rewards of this effort, and often they are not willing to invest this energy.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that you touched upon that, because unlike other businesses or line of work out there, recruitment, you got to have a longer time horizon. It's very difficult to start recruiting or go through a program, or you just start your agency and within 30 days do your first placement. It's possible, completely possible. But you just have to really luck out, or you just have to just right place, right time, right person, right? And just goes really, really fast. But I think for the most people, like, that's just very difficult to do. It's just unlikely, right? Not to mention the average interview time at a company is probably 2 to 4 weeks anyway, right? Just for one person to go through first interviews all the way to the negotiations and offers. So people got to have more patience. But to really help you, you got to push through, and you got to just be consistent, right? I think if you just come in and you're like, I want to make money like now or 1 week later, and if it doesn't work, it's a scam. Recruiting is not for me. Like you're not going to find success in recruiting, but you're also not going to find success anywhere else with that mentality. Right. So I think it's really, really important to have clear expectations and understand that recruitment is a people's game, right? And it's all about the relationships, and it's all about just like, putting in that work. And then if you can do that, the results will happen. But I also agree with what you said about niching down, right? That's super, super important, because like people talk most confidently about things that they know. So if you are niche down in like one market, you get to know that market really well. And so when you talk to hiring managers or you talk to candidates, you come off as someone who is very credible, right? Yeah. But if you do a little bit of everything, and you talk to a candidate this morning who is a software engineer, and then you talk to another candidate this afternoon who's a digital marketer, or another who's in healthcare nurse, like you're not going to come off credible to any of these people, because the knowledge that you have on each of these things are very shallow, and people know if you have no idea what you're talking about.
Of course,
right?
of course. And especially in IT, everything is just so technical. And it just breaks down to all of these tiny little frameworks and tools that these people use. And, I've been in IT for 18 or 19 years by now, and I don't recall, most of the terminology. That's why I created the mind maps. Now they have 80 pages of different levels of the terminology, from the really highest level. It's breaking down to the lower levels. So, like really, it's hard. And I've seen, actually, on this note, I've seen people who just transition and they make a placement within a month. It's rare, indeed. It's possible. They need to also be lucky, really, just to admit. But if I look at some of the average of our placements, we made almost 100 placements over the last 2.5 years. So it usually takes at least 3 months to make a placement and get money from the client, because most of the clients take forever to interview candidates. Even if I try to organize those interviews, but still they often go for a vacation, or they need time to decide, or whatever. There are gazillions of reasons why it takes so long. And then you send the invoice, and then you wait for the invoice to be paid. And then on the due date, you realize it's not paid. So you need to reach out to the client. They're like, oh, but we sent the money. And it just happened a month ago. We were chasing a client for another 2 weeks to pay the invoice. So, there are lots of ups and downs. So if someone is, as you say, looking for some quick wins, this may not be the business to earn quick cash. But really, which business offer this? Probably ice cream. If you have ice cream stand now, then that would be an option.
Yeah, I at least if you're not going to get paid from ice cream, at least you can just eat your own ice cream and still just be very, very happy.
So true. What
But yeah,
what
I like to think that the first 90 days minimum is like just learning the skills, putting in that good practice and good habits, developing them, and then just keep it going, right? A lot of success doesn't come from the snazziest tools or the coolest AI. It's just learning the fundamentals and backing it up with hard work. And if you can't work hard, it's just again, that's just not in recruiting alone. Like it's just going to be very difficult to find a level of success really in anything, right? So I think patience is important, but also willing to kind of roll your sleeves up and do the work consistently, I think is very, very key. Now, I did want to ask, so I'm from the States and you're in Europe right now. And so I would gather that a lot of the students who go through your coaching program are probably from around the world, but I'm sure like a lot of them are in Europe. So like what are you seeing uh as like the key differences between recruiting in Europe versus like the US market
Hmm.
for people who are
Yeah,
curious?
yeah, we have people who join even from Japan or from the Caribbean, from Canada. So the huge advantage of YouTube is that it's all international. So that's also why people join from all of these countries around the world. Some of the differences are in the business development because a lot of people who join our training programs, they are solopreneurs, which means they need to get their own clients to work for. And in some of the countries, it's easier. In some of the countries, it's more difficult. For example, in German and Austrian market here in Europe, it's very patriotic. So recruiters who would like to work internationally are usually not very successful approaching the local German, Swiss, and the Austrian market. On the other side, you guys have a huge advantage in the United States that while people can work remotely from within the US, you can really reach out to kind of anyone, and you can work for a client from Texas and still submit a candidate from North Carolina, for example, right, to work remotely. However, just thinking about some of the really successful recruiters, they still niche down. So I'm sure you know Benjamin Mena. I also had a great call with him just recently, and he was saying, "Hey, I just focus on cybersecurity within the Washington D.C. area." I mean, he knows the 2,500 cybersecurity engineers, and that's the people he goes after, even though the overall market is huge, right? So the business development is different and difficult in different countries. Some of the people who joined from Japan, for example, obviously cannot deploy some of the strategies that we here in Europe can take advantage of. The market is completely different. It gets people to meet face to face, and it's a very long-term process to get a client.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, but I think 90% or probably 99% of what you teach in your program is probably can be utilized with
Mm.
people around the world. And you just have to, like with any business, just adapt to your local market. So
Yeah.
that's very fascinating. I primarily have experience in the US. I've done a little bit in the UK, but not too much in mainland Europe. And so that's always been kind of very, very fascinating. And so for people who are very curious about kind of diving deeper into technical recruitment, so you have a program. Um, what journey do you kind of take people through if they kind of start with you?
Yeah, so the first step usually is to choose the niche. And I need to admit, I'm guilty of this myself, right? When we started 2.5, 3 years ago, the agency, I thought IT is the niche already, which later I discovered it's not really. So over the last 2.5 years, also I was working on all of these different segments of the IT world, analysts, DevOps, cloud, whatever. But just in the last 12 months, really, I realized how inefficient that was. So some of the most recent students now, as the first step, they choose their niche. And coming back to what we already discussed, cloud and DevOps is one of the trending niches these days. Security is the other one. Data engineering, business intelligence, the third one. So they usually choose what they would like to focus on, and then they go really deep in this segment of IT. So, when we had people 2, 3 years ago learning about the IT world, they, for example, learned about programming languages, frameworks, and whatnot. And then they learned about Docker, for example, just on a really high level. But now, and back then they didn't really go deep enough to be able to screen a candidate, whether he or she uses Kubernetes and Docker. And I don't want to go into details, but that's the shallow level where we had to stay because they need to cover all of these different segments of IT. But now when they niche down, they go much deeper in terms of what is the technology all about, how do the engineers use it, what kind of questions to ask to figure out whether the person really knows what he or she is talking about, so that the recruiter can do a good job in screening the candidate and eventually send the best one to the client. So this is a huge kind of evolution over the last 2 years. And then we obviously go through the sourcing methodologies, which are the same, whether you are in Europe or in the United States or Canada or the UK.
Do you have like a favorite? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. One thing just popped in my mind. In India, for example, we have lots of people joining us from India, but the search tools are slightly different because they use Naukri and some other local databases. So we also, our students from India go to get through slightly different sourcing methods. But LinkedIn is kind of everywhere except Japan, for example. It's not very strong in Japan. But the search methodology can be also applied in some of those local databases in Japan, because it's all about the advanced Boolean and the way to think about how to combine the keywords. That's really important. So a lot of the principles are applicable across different tools and search tools. I mean, now there are so many of them, right? With the AI kind of everywhere. It's just about choosing one and going with it.
Do you have like a favorite tool or tools that you like to use, or maybe your European or American kind of students use?
Yeah. Well,
aside from LinkedIn.
Yeah, this was a very popular question for the last 5 years, probably since I started the program. And during pretty much every Q&A, there is a question: oh, which tool should I use for sourcing? And I mean, it's always so. It's kind of funny but sad at the same time, because people haven't learned how to use LinkedIn the right way. They barely scratch the surface with how to find candidates on LinkedIn, yet they want to jump to something else, right? And always I'm like, hey guys, let's pause here. Let's spend a few hours learning how to get most out of LinkedIn. Just as an example, I have a son. He's 11 years old now, and he can also open LinkedIn. He can type front-end developer to the search bar, right? But that's just the scratching the surface search itself. We can go much deeper as soon as we start combining the different keywords and the tools that these front-end developers use. So coming back to your question, I mean, there are new tools popping up every day. My LinkedIn feed is full of new tools that are being released based on ChatGPT and how it can pre-screen candidates. One of the favorite ones is Nebula, actually. It's also the one where I had a great podcast interview with the CEO, and they do really cool stuff. They have been working on the tool for the last 7 years. So that's a great one. But with all of these tools, I would still let people to keep using LinkedIn the right way before they start shifting elsewhere, because most of the other tools, they just scrape LinkedIn. So they have the same data as LinkedIn, right? And they can reach out to people through LinkedIn, send emails. Yeah.
LinkedIn is king and will always remain king for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the time being.
For the time being, I was just going to say, like, a lot of the tools out there are basically extracting data from LinkedIn and with less functionality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And power. And so it's like, why waste your money on that? They might have sexier branding, right? Or like a cooler looking website, but just use LinkedIn. And so, but the interesting thing is, I don't really blame them, because if you decide to go into the recruiting game, so many tools out there.
Yep.
so many plugins, so many platforms, so many job sites, so many like AI things like you're talking about. It can be very, very overwhelming. And um, I'm always about just keeping things simple, you know? Like of course you can test out maybe a small allocation every time on new stuff, but like keep your original stack simple and
Yeah.
get to know it really, really well. Because if you know LinkedIn well, you don't need really anything else. Seriously. Maybe depending on your market, you might need other tools that could help. But I agree. Like LinkedIn is awesome. It's our OG and it will continue to be our OG. But at the same time, I'm also just kind of curious to see like what other people say and what other people use. I've actually never heard of Nebula, so that's a cool one that we'll maybe look into. But I appreciate that. And so what are your thoughts with like the future of recruiting and the future of recruitment with the advances of technology, and how is everything going to change, you think, in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was also asking this question a lot of people recently, just to see whether we are staying in the game or not, or leaving the party now. And it seems like there is still place for recruiters. And we also shifted our focus to the two segments. One is the DevOps and cloud, and C-level executives within the technology space. So it's very likely that the CTOs will stay around, right? Even though if front-end developers will not be. So one thing is what to focus on, and the other aspect to your question is, will companies still need recruiters to fill those positions? And I think yes, because this is the relationship business, really, especially for the A players. I mean, you can find B players and C players on LinkedIn or any job board, right? The low qualified jobs can always be filled with just simple job boards or postings on Facebook or wherever. But if you think about those real A players, people who have experience, people who have lots of opportunities, someone needs to pick up the phone and call them to convince them to join a company. And it's not going to be ChatGPT that will be initiating the call, right? People can now spot emails by ChatGPT, written by ChatGPT. So they will also spot phone calls that will be, dialed by some AI. So at the end, it will be the recruiter who is out there meeting people. Just imagine you had the list of 500 Java developers or CTOs in Germany, and you know them, they know you, you have their WhatsApp number, you have them in some WhatsApp group, and you can quickly just message them, hey guys, I'm looking for someone, anyone is interested. I think that will be the sweet spot for recruiters going forward, specialized with strong relationships, but not just with candidates, but also with businesses hiring.
Mm-hmm. I think you touched upon it perfectly. We are a people-to-people business. We are it relies very heavily not just on the quantitative skills, but also more the intangible soft skills, right? Just like what is it like communicating with another human being, not a messaging bot, and more importantly, being able to utilize soft skills to get other human beings excited, right? There's only so much technology can do to get people excited, to pitch them, but if you actually talk to a human being who knows your background well, who can pitch effectively to your interests. I mean, it's technology and AI has a long way to go to even come close to what a human being can do. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think every industry has a fear like, oh my God, is AI going to take over? Or in our market, is there still going to be a need for recruiters? Like I still see, and even now, best in class. It's so there's so much irony. The best in class AI startups, right? Maybe even more niche, best in class AI startups, HR recruiting are still using external recruiters to fill their roles, right? It's just there's a huge gap there, and if that ever closes, probably not in our lifetimes. So I still think adamantly like there's a huge need for recruiters. That's not going to change. This industry also is massive. It's been around for decades. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, the global recruitment staffing industry, right? And I think it's definitely an exciting place to take a hard look at if you're not a recruiter, or if you're in there, if you're in recruiting right now. There's so much opportunity. It's all about like be specialized into like what you want to do, right? What if you're a freelance or you're working for yourself, make make a persona for yourself. Do you niche down, like Michal was saying, like you want to be the OG guy in Munich, Germany about cybersecurity, or maybe like healthcare folks in Louisiana, right? Like just niche down as much as possible, develop a reputation, and then just kind of staying consistent. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
And there is one more thing that just popped in my mind now when you said the word staffing. Because mostly when we talk about recruiters, people imagine the contingent business model, the success fee, permanent placement. But I think this is also the area where the companies are just using the internal corporate recruiters to fill those roles these days. But what is likely here to stay is the outstaffing model with contractors, where a company may need a cloud engineer for a 3-month or 6-month project. And they will need someone to organize this. It's also connected to recruiting, but you are not really recruiting the person and getting the one-time fee, but instead you have some margin on top of the salary of the person. So with this, I think a lot of recruiters will over time shift to these agencies, if we can call them, very specialized agencies, because on the surface, really, you do the same job. You recruit people, but you don't collect the money once. You rather collect it over a sequence of a few months.
For sure. I mean, if most people had a choice to have stable weekly income versus, like a one-off monthly income, I think most people would choose that for just more stability and mental psychological ease, right? Standpoint. But in our industry, there's so many different business models. So you got the outsourcing, contracting, RPOs. We got the contingent, but you can also do retained. You can, it just goes on and on and on and on and on, right? So I think, like, depending on what you want to do, depending on your strengths, depending on your interests, there is a place in recruitment for everybody.
Yeah. Also, the market is changing. For example, 2-3 years ago, our clients paid the deposit, which is not a retainer really, but it was a prepayment, just a small amount, $2,000-$3,000 or euros for new clients, just to show some commitment. So the retainer usually is for the more executive roles, that's how I understand it. But for the last 6 months, really, we haven't really had any client to pay this, which is also an indication how the market is changing. The managers are just looking at the market. They see lots of recruiters, so they question, hey, why should we pay setup fee or some onboarding fee to this agency? Let's rather work with these other 5 agencies. So while there are lots of different business models, their preference is also changing over time. Still, there is space, for example, for retainer, or in case of the more senior roles, C-level, VP of engineering, definitely yes. With contingent model without any prepayment, it's really hard to make money these days. But the outstaffing, contracting business model, definitely something to explore.
You have to adapt, right? You have to adapt to whatever's happening. But I think what's really, really important is you have to do whatever you can to leave a good impression either way. Right. And so have to adapt, be flexible, just to even pick up that client or engage. But whether or not they hire from you or they don't hire from you, you want that hiring manager to walk away saying, wow, working with Preston or working with Michal was amazing. So next time that they do want to hire, they reach out to you. Right. Reputation and just good relationships is one of those things that people just don't, it's very low key, and it's kind of an understatement for a lot of people, because people just want that quick money, quick win now, and they'll do whatever they can, shortcuts, to get that, right? And I understand money is important, but understanding that, hey, if you're in this for the long term, and you're looking to build a business or a successful career in the long term, it's really important to do things correctly. And if that means you have to bite your lip, sometimes you just lose a client or you lose a role, but that client can possibly introduce you to other clients, or they can come back to you in the future. And even though you're not making money now, you can make money in the future. In my mind, it's always worth it.
Right? So true.
To be professional as much as you can, no matter how difficult it is.
Yeah. And on this note, how is the market on your end in New York?
Market is tough. I would say it's funny. I think as easy as it is to focus on the doom and gloom, like there is also just if you just go on the other side of the fence, companies that are getting funding and scaling and going crazy. But I would like to think that you have to look at the US market just with the macroeconomic perspective. Like there's a lot of economic financial headwinds that the country is going through right now, right? Interest rates, inflation, yada yada yada. It's just endless. So naturally, companies just want to spend less, right? So that in and of itself, it adds like an extra barrier of difficulty to just get new clients for sure. But at the same time, I think there's still just a same amount of companies that are growing and that are scaling, that just raised a massive seed or Series A round that are into growth phase, right? So it's all about like identifying those opportunities, knowing exactly kind of how to get into that, cultivate that relationship, or if you've been recruiting for a while, leverage your word of mouth kind of network for fantastic introductions or warm leads, and just do your best to capitalize on it as much as possible. But I would say, without a doubt, it's a lot more challenging now than 2 or 3 years ago for sure, when like no effort to get clients, no effort to do placements, right? Now it's like, it's really a time that will separate people who know what they're doing versus people who are just banking on luck, right? And skill. And so, but the one thing that I do not want to be afraid talking about is, yeah, it's tough also from an emotional, psychological point of view, right? Because I think a lot of our business is still in the success-based contingent. And so with that, when you do placements, life is amazing. But if you don't do placements, life can get stressful very, very fast, right? Because it's like on and off, on and off, on and off. And just the past 30 days, like there's so many offers on our end that just went the other way. And that like when you get a candidate, an offer stage, you can do whatever you can, right? To try to tip that needle, to have that candidate accept. But there's always that 5-10% where you do the best that you can and you just got to leave it up to the wind and see what happens, right? Like you're like, but then there's so many times like this year where I'm like, okay, like out of 5 offers, 4 of them for sure, I feel very strongly based on my experience and based on my relationship with candidates, they're going to go our way, and they're just going the other way, right? It's just like, it's just kind of nuts from that standpoint. We see more candidates that are continuing to interview after they get an offer. We see candidates that are not showing up on their first day more than ever. So I think just like the level of noise and competition is at a level I've never seen in my entire career. Which is nuts. And it's a trickle down effect in terms of how it's affecting us, our livelihood and our business as like the middle person. But the good news is that, again, companies are hiring and there's still great opportunities out there, but it's not without its challenges. Not without its challenges, Michal. It's been tough. But I'm hoping it gets better,
At least we will come out of this much stronger, right? And the fun thing is that when I was talking to someone who was in this business for 20, 30 years, they're like, oh, well, we had this before, this is nothing compared to 2008, or some of these claims. And I'm like, well, okay, well, that's not that bad yet. Could be worse.
Yeah, like I think there's a lot of people that are just happily waiting on the sidelines. Like, money is not an issue, or they just have tons of cash. Or like, I'll just wait and do nothing for 8 months. But I think the fun and the challenge with me is like, I want to just be able to produce in every market condition and just find a way. And I think when things get difficult, it just forces you to be creative or look at things differently, right? Force you to adapt. And I think that's cool. Like I embrace it. I embrace the difficulty. I kind of like the feeling of being challenged or like your back's against the wall, because for some reason, I think that's where I do my best work. Which is another reason why I just love contingent searches even now, even though we have a lot of opportunity to make a lot of them retained or get money up front. I just love the competitive drive of staffing and recruiting. But that's just me in a very weird way. But yeah, it's very unique. And every time I hear people say, oh, this is nothing compared to 2008, I'm like, that's great news. Like, don't tell me that. I don't want to know that. Because 2024, 2023 is very challenging, and it continues to be very, very challenging. But I guess it forces the people who are taking this seriously to kind of step up a little bit and see what's going on. How else can we produce? How else can we continue to have create value for clients here and for candidates, and still trying to push alive. So I think standing on the sidelines is not really an option for us. Like we still want to be very active, hands-on, and produce, but yeah, it just forces you to do things a little bit differently or to think differently, and then to kind of do the best that you can.
Yeah, well, I like this mindset a lot. And also there was a little business advice on top of this, or financial advice, we can say, having lots of cash would help, definitely,
It always helps.
So it always helps indeed. So that's something I haven't really managed well. I mean, my co-founder, he passed away last year. He was 35 years old, and it actually got us to not very pleasant financial situation because I had to take over lots of his responsibilities, and it also burned our cash reserves. So it often also feels like we are kind of on the last minute chasing some invoices. But that's also what I kind of like and appreciate about life in the long run. Not exactly in that moment, when an invoice is overdue, but in the long run, I appreciate this learning and the personal growth that I'm going through, because the alternative would be having a safe job in a corporate environment where I would not be as challenged and pushed as you just described, right? So this is the environment which also helps us to get stronger and get more out of life in the long run.
I think working for yourself is the most desired, I think, or just like the one of the biggest blessings you can ever have in life. I think there's nothing more fulfilling than it, rewarding than it. But if if you really want that, you also have to accept and embrace what comes with that territory. It's the other side. You have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be willing to take that pain, working with risks and manage cash flow and so much other stress that you would have to deal with that you don't have to if you just have a stable job, right? So I think a lot of people kind of want that nice car, they want that nice goal, but they're not willing to do or go through what it takes to get it, right? And I think entrepreneurship's not for everybody. I think some people would make terrible entrepreneurs. Some people can only do entrepreneurship. I think some are just born to be it, right? But I think there are a lot of good habits that you can create that, if you're afraid of entrepreneurship or you want to do it for the first time, you can just listen to someone who's been doing it, follow their advice, and then build good habits, and you can push through. But yes, that's what life is. It's a journey, right? Enjoy it. Of course, we all want big piles of cash, but I also think like it if you're able to kind of get through alive, Michal, which I hope you and I do. Maybe next time we do a video, we'll just have less hair on our heads. Hopefully, we can come out more wise. But just appreciate the journey, right? And just appreciate like just not giving up. And it really does feel like we're like soldiers in the trenches every single day, and you never know what tomorrow brings. But you just have to like do your best today, give it your all, and then just kind of hope for the best. Right.
Awesome. Well, this is very, very inspiring. So I also hope people who will be listening to this or watching on YouTube will be inspired, or they will probably say, hey, this is not for me, I'll do something else. And that's probably fine as well, right?
I think life is full of seasons. Life is full of chapters, right? And I think what you do now is not maybe perhaps what you'll do for the rest of your life. But it's super cool to meet someone like you, and to learn more about your background on how you went from really just a successful career in engineering. You became a CTO to now kind of go into the recruitment space and dive into YouTube, finding success there. And you're also just in a whole nother part of the world, right? You're in Europe and I'm in the States here, but very, very cool to like meet other like-minded people who are on similar journeys and kind of hearing more about what's making you tick and kind of what makes you excited for the future. So I think if you're listening and you're watching this and you want me and Michal to do more videos together, please comment down below and go ahead and like that video. We could totally use it. It's a tough market for all recruiters out there, and so any single like would really make our day. Yeah, if you really are fascinated about tech recruiting, you really want to learn more, I think Michal has a wonderful program. He has also just created amazing products like the Mind Map, which is a beautiful visual that can really help you understand just the inner workings of tech and what you need to know to be a successful tech recruiter. And so definitely give him a shout out and follow if you want. But I think for our first chat, I definitely had a wonderful time picking your brain, get to know you more, and excited to see like what else we do together.
Yeah, well, I feel so pumped up that it's 7 p.m., but I feel like going back to work, and closing some deals.
It's all about action, execution. Don't stop.
Exactly.
Don't ever
Let's
stop,
do it.
Michal.
Yeah, this was fun. Let's do this again. once people give some likes and some love on YouTube.
Yeah, I think either way, we'll still do videos together, but
Yeah.
I think it would really help us if you guys give us a like or two. Much, much appreciated and very grateful for that. But Michal, thank you so much for your time,
Thank
man.
you.
I know my
That's
day
awesome.
literally is just starting right now. It's I think it's yeah, it's 10 a.m. here, so I still got a whole day
Mhm.
with busy calls to do, but I'm glad we're able to make this happen and excited to kind of stay in touch and keep collaborating together.
It was super cool fun. Let's yeah, let's go close some clients, candidates as well, and I see you soon again on YouTube,
You got
on
it,
Zoom.
Michal.
Thank you. See you
Thank you
soon
so
again.
much.
See you guys, everyone. Bye.